Hi, and welcome back. I'm Steve Judge, and this is English for Communication 2. Today, we're going to begin discussing healthy lifestyles, Unit 2 in our series, where we're going to talk about English in the context of living a happy and healthy life. Today, we're going to review asking and giving advice in English. Today, I want to begin with a typical conversation two people might have about having a healthy lifestyle. As we go through the conversation, I want to see if you can spot out the useful language they use in the conversation to ask and give advice. So here we have John, who says, "Hey, Allie, how are you? How do you do it? How do you stay so healthy? You're always in good shape, never sick, and you must have so much energy. What should I do to be as healthy as you?" Allie responds, "Well, John, it's not that difficult. You have to drink plenty of water. You need to eat at least 5 servings of fruit and vegetables a day." John answers, "Is that all? Is there anything else I could do?" And Allie responds, "Yes, you must get some exercise. You don't have to go to the gym every day, but you should get some exercise several times a week. Do you take any vitamins?" "No, not at all. Do I have to take vitamins?" "You don't have to," Allie responds, "but you could take them to help you build up your body. You also shouldn't drink alcohol, and at all costs, you must not take any drugs." So some very common advice and information we all have about. You might have noticed some of the useful phrases. So let's look at some of the phrases they used. So let's look at some of the phrases Allie uses in the conversation to give John advice. First, we have must. Example, you must eat 5 servings of fruit or vegetables. We use must when the action is very important and has to be followed. It's one very important action. She also uses the phrase have to. Also, when the action is important, you have to drink 2 liters of water a day. Similar meaning, we use need to. You need to get 8 hours of sleep a day. And 4, she used should and could, which is a little weaker than must, have to, need to. We use should and could, saying that it's good advice, but it's not as important as regular. So you could take vitamins every day. Now notice after all these phrases, must, have to, need to, should, and could, you'll see the verb eat, drink, get, take. They're all verb 1. So we use verb 1 following all these phrases for giving advice. Let's look at these phrases and how they appear in negatives and questions. So in negatives, you have you must not use drugs. We have to, you don't have to go to the gym every day. You don't need to drink so much coffee. You shouldn't drink alcohol. And we don't use couldn't when giving advice. We use shouldn't. Now, have to and need to in negative have slightly different meanings. Where when we use must not, it means it's very important. Have to, you don't have to, and you don't need to is similar meaning to shouldn't, or weaker meaning to shouldn't. They mean that it's good advice not to, but it's your choice to follow the advice or not. Using these as questions, what must I do to stay healthy? What do I have to do to stay healthy? What do I need to do to stay healthy? What should I do to stay healthy? And what could I do to stay healthy? So again, must, have to, and need to in question are asking what's important. And should and could is asking for good advice. So the alternative ways for asking and giving advice. So alternative ways to give and ask for advice are using the phrasal verbs can, might, maybe, and using first conditionals. So example, you can go to bed earlier. You might try tracking your steps on an app. Maybe you could try a new sport. If you stop drinking coffee in the afternoon, you will sleep better at night. So again, we use verb 1 after using all these phrases. Let's look at them used in negatives and as questions. So you can see with can, you can't eat fast food every day. So a way of saying you must not eat fast food every day. Here we have might. You might not lose weight if you don't exercise. So indicating an action may not happen in the future. Here we have maybe you shouldn't go to bed at 1 a.m. So simple phrase, you shouldn't go to bed at 1 a.m. is good advice. We make it a little weaker advice by using the phrase maybe. Here we have using a first conditional. If you don't exercise more, you won't lose weight. So predicting a future where the person doesn't exercise, and because of that, in the future, they won't lose weight. So it's explaining the advice. So this, if you want to give the reason behind it, first conditionals are very useful. In questions, we have what can I do to stay healthy? What might I do to stay healthy? Here we have maybe I could get surgery. So it's a sentence, but in the tone, you make it into a question where the person will agree or disagree with you. And we don't use first conditionals in asking for advice. So let's look back at the conversation we had between John and Ali and see if you can spot any of these useful phrases in giving and asking for advice. Take a moment, read the conversation, and see what you see. How many did you notice? So what should I do? You have to. You need to. Could do. Must. Have to. Should. Have to as a question. You don't have to. You could. And you must. How'd you do? Did you get them all? So thanks again. My name is Steve Judge, and this was Unit 2, Healthy Living, Asking and Giving Advice. Have a good day. Bye.